The Ideal by Stanley G. Weinbaum. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Greg Marguerite. The Ideal by Stanley G. Weinbaum. "This," said the Franciscan, "is my automaton, who at the proper time will speak, answer whatsoever question I may ask, and reveal all secret knowledge to me." He smiled as he laid his hand affectionately on the iron skull that topped the pedestal. The youth gazed open-mouthed, first at the head and then at the friar. "But it's iron," he whispered. "The head is iron, good father." "Iron without, skill within, my son," said Roger Bacon. "It will speak at the proper time and in its own manner, for so have I made it. A clever man can twist the devil's arts to God's ends, thereby cheating the fiend. Tst! There sounds vespers. Plenta gratia ave Virgo. But it did not speak. Long hours, long weeks, the Doctor Mirabilis watched his creation, but iron lips were silent and the iron eyes were dull, and no voice but the great man's own sounded in his monkish cell. Nor was there ever an answer to all the questions that he asked, until one day when he sat surveying his work, composing a letter to Duns Scotus in distant Cologne. One day. "Time is," said the image, and smiled benignly. The friar looked up. "Time is indeed," he echoed. "Time it is that you give utterance, and to some assertion less obvious than time is. For of course time is, else there were nothing at all without time." "Time was," rumbled the image, still smiling, but sternly at the statue of Draco. "Indeed time was," said the monk. "Time was, is, and will be, for time is that medium in which events occur. Matter exists in space, but events—" The image smiled no longer. "Time is past," it roared in tones deep as the cathedral bell outside, and burst into 10,000 pieces. "There," said old Haskell Van Manderpootz, shutting the book, "is my classical authority in this experiment. The story, overlaid as it is with medieval myth and legend, proves that Roger Bacon himself attempted the experiment, and failed." He shook a long finger at me. "Yet do not get the impression, Dixon, that Friar Bacon was not a great man. He was, extremely great. In fact, he lighted the torch that his namesake Francis Bacon took up 4 centuries later, and that now Van Manderpootz rekindles." I stared in silence. "Indeed," resumed the professor, "Roger Bacon might almost be called a 13th century Van Manderpootz, or Van Manderpootz a 21st century Roger Bacon, his opus majus, opus minus, and opus tertium." "What," I interrupted impatiently, "has all this to do with that?" I indicated the clumsy metal robot standing in the corner of the laboratory. "Don't interrupt," snapped Van Manderpootz. "I'll—" At this point I fell out of my chair. The mass of metal had ejaculated something like "a grasp," and had lunged a single pace forward towards the window, arms upraised. "What the devil!" I sputtered as the thing dropped its arms and returned stolidly to its place. "A car must have passed in the alley," said Van Manderpootz indifferently. "Now, as I was saying, Roger Bacon—" I ceased to listen. When Van Manderpootz is determined to finish a statement, interruptions are worse than futile. As an ex-student of his, I know. So I permitted my thoughts to drift to certain personal problems of my own, particularly Tips Alva, who was the most pressing problem at the moment. Yes, I mean Tips Alva, the vision dancer, the little blonde imp who entertains on the yerba mate hour for that Brazilian company. Chorus girls, dancers, and television stars are a weakness of mine. Maybe it indicates that there's a latent artistic soul in me. Maybe. I'm Dixon Wells. You know, scion of the N.J. Wells Corporation, engineers extraordinary. I'm supposed to be an engineer myself. I say supposed because in the 7 years since my graduation, my father hasn't given me much opportunity to prove it. He has a strong sense of value of time, and I'm cursed with the unenviable quality of being late to anything and for everything. He even asserts that the occasional designs I submit are late Jacobean, but that isn't fair. They're post-Romanesque. Old N.J. also objects to my penchant for ladies of the stage and vision screens, and periodically threatens to cut my allowance, though that's supposed to be a salary. It's inconvenient to be so dependent, and sometimes I regret that unfortunate market crash of 2009 that wiped out my own money. Although it did keep me from marrying Whimsy White, and Van Manderpootz, through his subjunctivisor, succeeded in proving that that would have been a catastrophe. But it turned out nearly as much of a disaster anyway, as far as my feelings were concerned. It took me months to forget Joanna Caldwell and her silvery eyes. Just another instance when I was a little late. Van Manderpootz himself is my old physics professor, head of the Department of Newer Physics at NYU, and a genius, but a bit eccentric. Judge for yourself. "And that's the thesis," he said, suddenly interrupting my thoughts. "Eh? Oh, of course. But what's that grinning robot got to do with it?" He purpled. "I've just told you," he roared. "Idiot! Imbecile! To dream while Van Manderpootz talks! Get out! Get out!" I got. It was late anyway, so late that I overslept more than usual in the morning and suffered more than the usual lecture on promptness from my father at the office. Van Manderpootz had forgotten his anger by the next time I dropped by for an evening. The robot still stood in the corner near the window, and I lost no time asking its purpose. "It's just a toy I had some of the students construct," he explained. "There's a screen of photoelectric cells behind the right eye so connected that when a certain pattern is thrown on them it activates the mechanism. The thing's plugged into the light circuit, but it really ought to run on gasoline." "Why?" "Well, the pattern it's set for is the shape of an automobile. See here." He picked up a card from his desk and cut in the outlines of a streamlined car like those of that year. "Since only one eye is used," he continued, "the thing can't tell the difference between a full-sized vehicle at a distance and this small outline nearby. It has no sense of perspective." He held the bit of cardboard before the eye of the mechanism. Instantly came its roar, "A grasp!" and it leapt forward a single pace, arms upraised. Van Manderpootz withdrew the card, and again the thing relapsed stolidly into its place. "What the devil!" I exclaimed. "What's it for?" "Does Van Manderpootz ever do work without reason back of it? I use it as a demonstration in my seminar." "To demonstrate what?" "The power of reason," said Van Manderpootz solemnly. "How and why ought it to work on gasoline instead of electric power?" "One question at a time, Dixon. You have missed the grandeur of Van Manderpootz's concept. See here. This creature, imperfect as it is, represents the predatory machine. It is the mechanical parallel of the tiger, lurking in its jungle to leap on living prey. This monster's jungle is the city. Its prey is the unwary machine that follows the trails called streets. Understand?" "No." "Well, picture this automaton, not as it is, but as Van Manderpootz could make it if he wished. It lurks gigantic in the shadows of buildings. It creeps stealthily through the dark alleys. It skulks on deserted streets, with its gasoline engine purring quietly. Then an unsuspecting automobile flashes its image on the screen behind its eyes. It leaps. It seizes its prey, swinging it in steel arms to its steel jaws. Through the metal throat of its victim crash steel teeth. The blood of its prey, the gasoline that is drained into its stomach, or its gas tank. With renewed strength it flings away the husk and prowls on to seek other prey. It is the machine carnivore, the tiger of mechanics." I suppose I stared dumbly. It occurred to me suddenly that the brain of the great Van Manderpootz was cracking. "What the—" I gasped. "That," he said blandly, "is but a concept. I have many other uses for the toy. I can prove anything with it. Anything I wish." "You can? Then prove something." "Name your proposition, Dixon." I hesitated, nonplussed. "Come," he said impatiently. "Look here. I will prove that anarchy is the ideal government, or that heaven and hell are the same place, or that—" "Prove that," I said. "About heaven and hell." "Easily. First we will endow my robot with intelligence. I add a mechanical memory by means of the old Cushman delayed valve. I add a mathematical sense with any of the calculating machines. I give it a voice and a vocabulary with the magnetic impulse wire phonograph. Now the point I make is this. Granted an intelligent machine, does it not follow that every other machine constructed like it must have the identical qualities? Would not each robot, given the same insides, have exactly the same character?" "No," I snapped. "Human beings can't make two machines exactly alike. There'd be tiny differences. One would react quicker than the other, or one would prefer fox air splitters as prey, while others reacted more vigorously to carnivorous